7 years after relocating from County Louth, Ireland to New York City, 39-year-old Denise Morgan was found dead at a property in Queens alongside the body of her partner, 33-year-old Jode Taveras, in October of 2023. Taveras had shot Morgan in the back of the head before also succumbing to a gunshot wound. In the weeks prior to her death, Morgan told her sisters that Taveras had strangled her and held a knife to her throat. According to the victim's loved ones, Taveras had started subjecting her to coercive abuse years earlier after she discovered that he was cheating on her. Morgan had finally ended her relationship with Taveras and was due to move into her own apartment 10 days after she was killed. Since the murder, her family has made it their mission to raise awareness about domestic violence and the red flags that people should look out for in their relationships to avoid a similar fate. Number 31. Ethan Nieneker. In what's been described as a random shooting, a gunman opened fire on strangers outside a Target store in Austin, Texas on the morning of August 11, 2025. Later identified as 32-year-old Ethan Nieneker, he fatally shot 3 victims, including 2 adults and 1 child, before fleeing the scene in a stolen car. 65-year-old Adam Chow and his granddaughter were pronounced dead at the scene, while a 24-year-old employee, Hector Leopoldo Martinez Machuca, succumbed to his injuries at a nearby hospital. Throughout the ensuing police chase, Nieneker caused several car crashes before wrecking his getaway vehicle. He then attempted to steal a water truck, stole a second car from a dealership, and threw a brick through an acquaintance's window. By the time law enforcement caught up with Nieneker, he had ditched his clothing in a porta potty and was walking around naked with a Bible in his hand. He refused to comply with officers' orders and was tased before being taken into custody. Nieneker was charged with 2 counts of capital murder and 1 count of murder, and authorities say additional charges could be forthcoming. He has a record of past arrests for misdemeanor and felony domestic violence and assault, as well as a history of mental illness. In 2016, he served jail time after being convicted of assault causing bodily injury against a family member. According to reports, at least 2 past girlfriends and 1 roommate have accused Nieneker of punching and strangling them, showing his alleged propensity for violence. In 2018, police responded to 2 reports about an emotionally disturbed person involving Nieneker, which has left some wondering if he slipped through the cracks of the system and if the murders were preventable. Since the killings, he's been detained at the Travis County Jail with bond set at $2.5 million. Number 30. Valdo Calocane. On June 13th of 2013, a paranoid man stabbed 2 university students and a caretaker in Nottingham, England, killing 19-year-old Barnaby Webber, 19-year-old Grace O'Malley Kumar, and 65-year-old Ian Coates. Later identified as 32-year-old Valdo Calocane, he then stole Coates' work van and attempted to run people over, injuring 5 additional victims. At the time of the killings, Calocane was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. For several years leading up to the murders, he reportedly heard voices that he believed were controlling and threatening him. Calocane also believed that Britain's intelligence agency, MI6, and his housemates were spying on him and his family. He was hospitalized 4 times for mental health reasons, including for the violent break-in of a neighbor's flat, and was repeatedly prescribed medication during that time period, but refused to take it. Additionally, Calocane had a documented history of aggression toward healthcare workers. 3 years before the Nottingham stabbings, a psychiatrist had warned of his fears that the man's violent tendencies would continue and that he may even end up killing someone. Calocane's family members were aware of his mental illness and had tried getting him help to no avail, leaving them with the belief that the stabbings could have been prevented. In November of 2023, Calocane admitted to 3 counts of manslaughter on the basis of diminished responsibility and 3 counts of attempted murder. He was committed indefinitely to treatment at a secure mental hospital, where the judge said he may very well end up spending the rest of his life. Number 29. Bradford James Gille. 11 people were hospitalized in July of 2025 after a crazed man entered a Walmart store near Traverse City, Michigan, and stabbed random victims. Customers stopped the violent rampage by subduing the suspect, 42-year-old Bradford James Gille, in the store's parking lot. Gille has an extensive criminal history dating back to 2002, with many charges dismissed or reduced due to mental health issues. In 2017, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and hospitalized for up to 60 days for trying to dig up the grave of a person he believed had been buried alive. Gille's past charges also include domestic violence, felony assault, assault with a dangerous weapon, and assault and battery. At the time of the stabbings, he was wanted on an arrest warrant in neighboring Emmett County. Sheriff's deputies searched for him the day before the attack, but were unable to locate him. After the stabbings, a defense attorney who represented Gille nearly 2 decades ago told the Detroit Free Press that it was clear his client needed further intervention and that it's overdue for the state to reanalyze its approach to mental health issues in the criminal justice system. Gille pleaded not guilty to 1 count of terrorism and 11 counts of assault with intent to murder. He's being held at the Grand Traverse County Correctional Facility with bonds set at $1 million. Number 28. Jaime Davidson. As he prepared to leave office in early 2021, President Donald Trump issued dozens of pardons and commutations to convicted criminals. Included among them was Jaime A. Davidson, who was serving time for the 1990 murder of Syracuse, New York police officer Wally Howard Jr. during a robbery gone wrong. Davidson wasn't present at the murder scene, but he was convicted of the charge for his role in planning the crime. He has maintained his innocence ever since, insisting that he had nothing to do with the killing. According to an official statement from the White House, after he was granted clemency, several witnesses had recanted their testimony about his involvement in the deadly robbery. Davidson was one of few violent convicts who received clemency from Trump. His defense attorney was part of a team of lawyers who represented Donald Trump Jr., leading to speculation that he was released from prison due to his legal connections. Following his release from prison in 2020, Davidson moved to Orlando, Florida, got married and started a new life. But he landed back behind bars in 2023 after being found guilty of misdemeanor battery for strangling his wife. He was sentenced to 3 months in prison for the crime, but appealed his conviction, leaving the victim terrified that he would strike again following his release. Number 27. Raul Meza Jr. After serving about 1/3 of a 30-year sentence in Texas for the 1982 murder of a young girl named Kendra Page, 63-year-old Raul Meza Jr. was freed early under state laws which gave inmates time off their sentence in exchange for good behavior. Outraged civilians protested Meza's release, effectively driving him out of 6 cities before he pleaded with the public for a second chance, stating, "In my heart, I know that I will not willfully bring harm to anyone." But Meza went back on his word, and in 2023 he was charged with the murders of his roommate, 80-year-old Jesse Fraga, and 65-year-old Gloria Lofton, who was killed in 2019. His arrest came after he called the authorities and implicated himself in the killings. Sean Page, the brother of Meza's first victim, told local news outlet KVUE that he and his family had done everything in their power to prevent the convicted killer from being paroled. He said that they knew Meza was dangerous, but that no one listened. In October of 2024, Meza pleaded guilty to 1 count of capital murder and 1 count of murder in order to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life without parole. The decision to allow a plea deal went against the wishes of the victims' families, who had hoped to see the case go to trial and for prosecutors to seek capital punishment. Number 26. Robert Card. On the evening of October 25, 2023, a 40-year-old U.S. Army reservist named Robert Card opened fire on members of the public at a bowling alley in Lewiston, Maine, killing 7 people. He then drove 4 miles to a restaurant and continued shooting at strangers, killing 8 victims at the scene and wounding 3 others who later died from their injuries. Lewiston's residents were ordered to shelter in place while a large-scale manhunt ensued. Nearly 2 days later, authorities found Card dead in the woods. Just 3 months before the massacre, Card's fellow Army Reserve trainees had noticed alarming changes in his behavior. They told their superiors and law enforcement that Card was hearing voices and had threatened to shoot up a military base, and he was hospitalized for 2 weeks while receiving psychiatric care. One of the people who tried to raise the alarm was Card's best friend, Sean Hodgson, who texted their supervisor about his fear that Card would snap and do a mass shooting. Card's sister-in-law would later tell NBC News that he had started hearing voices after getting a hearing aid. During a conversation with sheriff's deputies, he said that he believed his friends and fellow service members were mocking and plotting against him. Card's mental health continued to decline after his release from the hospital, but his family's efforts to get his guns taken away were unsuccessful. In the meantime, Card stopped taking his medication while remaining in denial about his mental illness. After the Lewiston shootings, both the military and law enforcement fell under scrutiny for their alleged failures to take more effective action to prevent Card from acting on his murderous desires. An official report found that there were numerous missed opportunities to stop the carnage from happening, and the state improved its yellow flag gun law by expanding background checks and easing the process of revoking firearms from owners experiencing a mental health crisis. Number 25. Parris Miller. 44-year-old Parris Donzel Miller has been in and out of the Washington state justice system since 1994, when he was convicted of possessing stolen property at the age of 14. Since then, he's never spent more than 5 years in the free world. In 2000, at the age of 21, Miller pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was eventually released from prison after serving part of a 22-year sentence, only to strike again a year and a half later in September of 2022. Following a verbal confrontation at a gas station in Tacoma, he fatally shot Glennis Liddell Piper, who believed Miller was mean-mugging him and staring him down in an intimidating manner. Prior to the shooting, Piper approached Miller and confronted him. The victim then drove back to his workplace as Miller followed, and another verbal altercation took place. As Piper walked up to Miller's SUV one last time, Miller pulled a pistol and shot him once. He fled the scene, while Piper succumbed to his injuries in the parking lot. After being pulled over and fleeing during a traffic stop, Miller led police on a high-speed chase, reaching speeds of up to 100 miles per hour while weaving in and out of traffic. He was taken into custody after driving 7 miles to an apartment complex. Miller claimed that he only meant to scare Piper and that his intention wasn't to kill the victim. He was charged with several crimes, including first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, and first-degree unlawful possession of a firearm. After deliberating for just an hour following his trial in May of 2023, a jury found him guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder, attempting to elude a pursuing police vehicle, and 2 counts of first-degree unlawful possession of a firearm. The twice-convicted killer was sentenced to 43 years in prison, which means he may never see freedom again. Number 24. Randy Stair. In June of 2017, 24-year-old supermarket employee Randy Robert Stair opened fire on co-workers at his workplace in Tunkhannock, Pennsylvania, striking 25-year-old Victoria Brong, 47-year-old Brian Hayes, and 63-year-old Terry Lee Sterling. Police arrived at the scene to find the victims dead and Stair dead from gunshot wounds. Armed with 2 guns, Stair fired around 60 shots during the attack. But for reasons that remain unclear to this day, he refrained from shooting one female co-worker who he crossed paths with and instead allowed her to live. It quickly became clear based on Stair's social media content that the shooting was premeditated. Using the alias Andrew Blaze, he had uploaded videos and created posts detailing his plans to harm others, as well as his struggles with gender identity and a fear of aging past his 20s. He expressed a fascination with mass shootings, hailing Columbine shooters Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris as heroes, and seemed to believe that by committing the attack he would transport himself to an imaginary cartoon world. Stair and his alter egos were very active on his YouTube channel, Twitter, and other platforms, yet the authorities apparently remained unaware of his ominous warnings about what was to come. In the videos and photos, he could be seen brandishing and shooting guns, and in one post he described his plan for the massacre in great detail. According to law enforcement, no one raised the alarm about Stair's troubling content, but his reasons for killing the victims are still somewhat of a mystery to this day, with the official opinion being that Stair experienced a mental health crisis that spiraled out of control. Number 23. Clifford Farthing. Homicides are rare in Iosco County, Michigan, where a 53-year-old parolee named Clifford Farthing fatally shot 42-year-old William Ardith Jackson during a money-related dispute in July of 2025. The victim's body was discovered in the Huron National Forest by a conservation officer who found Jackson's remains in a bloody rolled-up carpet inside of an abandoned pickup truck. Police identified the truck's owner as Jackson's girlfriend, Doreen Shunk. While executing a search warrant at a property belonging to Shunk, detectives found blood evidence in an outbuilding. Investigators also linked the crime to Farthing, who reportedly confessed to shooting Jackson 3 times with a gun Shunk had given to him after the couple argued about finances. He then dropped the body and pickup truck off at the site where they were found, and Shunk drove him home, stopping at one of her properties to hide the murder weapon along the way. This isn't the first time Farthing has fallen under legal scrutiny for killing someone. Back in 1985, when he was a teenager, he was convicted of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison but was released in 2023 due to a law stating that life sentences with no chance of parole are unconstitutional for juvenile offenders. After being paroled, Farthing was placed at a hotel in Tawas City. Despite having no ties to Iosco County, County Prosecutor Jim Baccarella told ABC 12 that putting the released convict in that location violated Department of Corrections policy and that he believes Jackson would still be alive if the agency had not placed Farthing in the area. Following his arrest, Farthing was charged as a habitual offender with open murder and using a firearm to commit a felony. His case has been bound over for trial, while Doreen Shunk faces 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder and using a firearm to commit a felony. Number 22. Junior Boucher. In what news reports have described as a seemingly random attack, a 36-year-old Florida man named Junior Boucher is accused of killing 65-year-old Brian Hilterbitel at the Sand Hill Crane Golf Club in Palm Beach Gardens. According to police, Boucher beat Hilterbitel with golf clubs in November of 2024 before dragging him to a nearby pond and drowning him. Officers arrived at the scene to find the victim lying dead on the fairway and an unclothed Boucher attempting to flee the scene on foot. Boucher and Hilterbitel were strangers, leaving the accused killer's motive for the crime unclear. But a look into his past by CBS 12 reporters offered some clues regarding his possible mindset at the time. Earlier that day, deputies were summoned to Boucher's home after receiving a call from his concerned mother about his erratic and aggressive behavior. He has a history of mental illness and run-ins with law enforcement and was reportedly banging on people's doors and making bizarre and incoherent statements prior to killing Hilterbitel. In 2022, Boucher was arrested for attacking a police K9 and trying to run over a deputy. His mother mentioned that he had also previously been involuntarily detained for psychiatric evaluations under Florida's Baker Act. Forensic psychologist Dr. Michael Brannon, who is not involved in the case, told CBS 12 that untreated mental illness can lead to tragedy. Even if a person's family is concerned, they can't force the individual into treatment or to take medication, often leading to unsuccessful attempts to get someone the help they need. Boucher's case appears to be ongoing. In the meantime, he remains in custody at the Palm Beach County Detention Center. Number 21. Robert Yacone. In September of 2024, Doña Ana County Sheriff's deputies responded to the Las Cruces, New Mexico home of 59-year-old restaurant owner Robert Bob Yacone. 911 dispatchers had received a call from Bob's son, who said that his father had seriously wounded his mother, 48-year-old Kimberly Yacone, and that there was a shotgun inside the home. Responding members of law enforcement forced their way into the residence, where they found Kimberly dead in the master bedroom with injuries to her face and back. Bob had staked himself out on the bedroom's balcony, where he engaged in negotiations with a crisis specialist. He indicated that he had a handgun and reportedly charged at deputies, who shot him in the torso and forearm. It was later determined that Bob was unarmed at the time of the incident. After Kimberly's death, news outlets released police body cam footage from 2 previous domestic violence incidents involving the Yacones. In the first video from March of 2024, Robert could be heard telling deputies that he believed Kimberly was cheating on him, while Kimberly claimed that her husband suffered from mental issues. She also said that Robert had threatened to kill her and that she had nowhere to go because he controlled all their money. In response, a deputy advised the couple to work out their problems. Robert showed law enforcement pictures of what he believed was another man in the Yacone's bedroom, while a deputy responded that it looked like the shade hitting the room. During the second video from August of 2024, Kimberly told deputies that Robert was mentally wrong and that the couple had been experiencing issues for months. She filed for 4 restraining orders in the year leading up to her death, and police had responded to the home 15 times in recent years. Following Kimberly's death, Robert was taken to the hospital, where his condition stabilized, and was charged with first-degree murder and being a felon in possession of a firearm. Police kept a 24-hour watch over him as he remained in the hospital, where doctors determined that he would likely survive. But his condition took a turn for worse 2 months later, and he died from complications related to his wounds. Number 20. Kendrick Fisher. In late November of 2024, a Houston resident flagged down a police cruiser during the early morning hours and said that a man was holding 2 victims hostage inside a nearby apartment. Officers entered the residence shortly before 3 a.m. and found one of the household members, 29-year-old Kendrick Fisher, covered in blood and sleeping on the couch. They then discovered the murdered bodies of Kendrick's sister, 28-year-old Janine Fisher, and her young daughter, Carly, who had both been stabbed to death. Kendrick was taken into custody and is now facing capital murder charges, but his mother, Joanna Fisher, told reporters that the victims' deaths could have been prevented. Speaking with Click 2 Houston, she said that the family had tried desperately to get mental help for Kendrick prior to the killings. Joanna explained that she had repeatedly contacted law enforcement in hopes of getting her son institutionalized, but that the family didn't receive the help they needed. Just days before the murders, she had filed a police report accusing Kendrick of hitting her after she caught him trying to steal money. The suspect's campaign of destruction reportedly continued until someone forcibly removed him from the home, but no one was charged in connection with the incident. Hours before she was killed, Janine had called the police and told them to kick in the front door instead of knocking, but no one answered the door or phone when officers responded to the scene, so they left. Joanne Fisher said that she believes Kendrick's actions were influenced by fake marijuana he got from his friends, which caused him to go into a rampage. The case is ongoing, but Kendrick no longer appears to be in police custody. Number 19. Idris Haji-Mohamed. In what was later described as a drug deal gone bad, 26-year-old Jeremy Ellis was shot to death in Moorhead, Minnesota, in late December of 2022. Officers found the victim's bullet-riddled body inside of a running vehicle after receiving a call from a witness who saw 27-year-old Idris Haji-Mohamed ducking near a car after she overheard a gunshot. Haji-Mohamed was the registered owner of the vehicle that Ellis's body was found in. He told police that he was buying drugs from Ellis when the victim ordered him out of the car at gunpoint. According to the suspect's version of events, Ellis began to reverse the car, at which point Haji-Mohamed shot him multiple times. At the time of the shooting, Haji-Mohamed was out on bail for a homicide that took place in Clay County in September of 2021. In that case, he was accused of chasing down 27-year-old Abdi outside a gas station and shooting him 5 times at point-blank range. Haji-Mohamed was released from custody after posting a $1 million bond. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder charges in both cases and received concurrent prison sentences of 25.5 years and 30 years. Number 18. Nathan Cureton. In May of 2025, 38-year-old Nathan Cureton kidnapped his girlfriend, 24-year-old Taylor Mirage, at a Maudlin, South Carolina gas station. Witnesses later told police that Mirage had entered the business and asked several people for help before Cureton came inside and told her it was time to leave. He forced Mirage into a car and drove away as she tried to escape. By the time police caught up with Cureton and the victim, they were both dead from bullet wounds. Just a few months earlier, Cureton had been charged with kidnapping, resisting arrest, and domestic violence for another incident involving Mirage, who gave the judge a signed affidavit stating that the situation was a misunderstanding. The judge released Cureton on a $25,000 bond and placed him on GPS monitoring. 2 years prior to Mirage's murder, Cureton was convicted of second-degree assault and battery. In addition to being out on bond for the more recent charges he was facing, he was on probation for that case during the kidnapping that led to Mirage's death. Following Mirage's murder, prosecutor Walt Wilkins told Fox Carolina that domestic violence cases are often complicated by victims' reluctance to tell the truth due to fear of retaliation from their abuser. At the time of the killing, Cureton was under a zero-tolerance policy, which meant that his probation and bond would be revoked if he got in any more legal trouble, but police were unable to get to him before the situation ended in tragic violence. Number 17. Christopher Dunlop. 50-year-old Christopher Dunlop was released from prison in 2022 after serving 13 years for the manslaughter of Laura Furlan, who was working as an escort in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, when she was strangled to death in 2009. After Furlan's death, Dunlop had told undercover investigators that he was looking for a victim who wouldn't be missed. In February of 2023, just a year after re-entering the free world, Dunlop murdered another escort, 58-year-old Judy Mayers, who was found dead in a park after being stabbed 79 times, doused in gasoline and set on fire. Meyers struggled with addiction and had recently found a home for the first time in 12 years, reflecting Dunlop's tendency to target vulnerable victims. After killing Meyers, Dunlop attempted to destroy evidence, inadvertently leaving his DNA behind at the crime scene. In July of 2025, he was convicted of first-degree murder, resulting in an automatic life sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years, along with a concurrent 5-year sentence for committing indignity to a human body. Number 16. Daniel Jones. Gabriel Grande was just 14 years old when he was killed in a hit-and-run crash in November of 2024 while riding home on his bike in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Emergency responders found him clinging to life and airlifted him to a Phoenix hospital where he died from his injuries. Following a 2-month investigation, authorities charged 36-year-old Daniel Jones with manslaughter and driving under the influence of drugs. Witnesses told police that the suspect was driving erratically, and a toxicology test revealed that there were multiple substances in his system at the time of the crash. Jones was freed from custody after posting a $100,000 bond, but landed back behind bars in April of 2025 after police found methamphetamine in his car during a traffic stop. Gabriel Grande's parents had vocally opposed the court's decision to release Jones on bond, and they were relieved when he ended up back in custody, telling reporters that they were glad no one else was harmed and that the streets were now a little safer. Number 15. Sabrina Lynn Faiai. 61-year-old Sabrina Lynn Faiai of Honolulu, Hawaii, was convicted for her first stabbing crime in 2001 when she pleaded guilty to manslaughter for the death of her then-husband, 36-year-old Abe Faiai. The plea deal came after the defendant claimed in court that Abe had physically and emotionally abused her and the couple's children. Faiai received a maximum prison sentence of 20 years, but was already out on parole in August of 2005 when she was arrested for stabbing her then-boyfriend, Keone Du Bois. She was charged with attempted murder but pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of attempted manslaughter in 2006, resulting in a 20-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 6 years and 8 months. Court-appointed experts found that Faiai was suffering from a methamphetamine-induced psychotic disorder at the time of the second stabbing. She had once again been released when she was accused of stabbing her 44-year-old boyfriend in May of 2025. The victim survived and Faiai was charged with attempted second-degree murder. While the status of the case is unclear, records show that she's currently incarcerated at the Women's Community Correctional Center in Kailua. Number 14. Antoine Surge. In late May of 2023, 43-year-old Antoine R. Peanut Surge was arrested for the shooting death of 20-year-old Edry DeLove Thompson, who was killed during a confrontation with a group of people at a Richland, Washington apartment complex. According to police, Surge chased Thompson through the building and shot him for a second time after his first shot missed. He had fled the scene by the time police arrived, but was taken into custody 9 days later on a second-degree murder charge. This wasn't the first time Surge was accused of killing someone. Back in 2002, he was sentenced to 16 years in prison for the death of his girlfriend's estranged husband. He also had a second-degree assault conviction resulting from a standoff that took place in 2019 after he assaulted a man with a gun in Benton City. After deliberating for a day and a half following a 9-day trial in June of 2025, a jury found Surge guilty of Thompson's murder, marking his third strike under Washington's 3 strikes law. He appears to be awaiting sentencing and is facing a life sentence due to his criminal history. Number 13. Maribel Martinez Garcia. 40-year-old Mexican national Maribel Martinez Garcia had been deported from the United States 3 times when she was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama in early 2007 for the shooting death of 32-year-old Francisco Ostiquin Cervantes. The victim was killed in a wooded area during a robbery at the hands of Garcia and 2 male accomplices, including her boyfriend at the time. Garcia pleaded guilty to a reduced murder charge and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. With 17 years suspended, she was deported to Mexico for a 4th time in 2010 after serving 3 years, but re-entered the US illegally for a 5th time at an unknown date and time. The repeat offender was most recently apprehended in August of 2024 after being found at a residence in Houston, Texas. At the time of her arrest, Garcia was in possession of a counterfeit Social Security card and lawful permanent resident card. Immigration and Customs Enforcement announced in a statement that she was referred for prosecution for illegal re-entry and could face additional charges. Number 12. Sebastian Eccleston. 49-year-old Sebastian Eccleston's criminal and mental health history dates back to his teenage years, when he began using drugs and struggling with manic depression. In December of 1994, he fatally shot high school football star Ricky Comingo during a road rage incident. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, along with an additional 35-year federal sentence for carjacking and escaping from jail while in pre-trial detention. Both of Eccleston's sentences were eventually reduced, and in 2023 he was released on supervision, but he landed back in custody in June of 2025 following a domestic dispute in Marathon, New York. According to law enforcement, he was accused of choking and physically harming his wife during an argument, causing her to suffer 2 fractured ribs and torn cartilage in her throat. Eccleston had also allegedly been drinking alcohol when the incident occurred, which violates the terms of his supervised release. He was charged in state court with felony strangulation and misdemeanor assault, and was released on his own recognizance, but was subsequently detained by federal authorities on a probation violation charge. Eccleston no longer appears to be in custody, leaving the current status of his cases unclear. Number 11. Kalani Hodges. 23-year-old convicted killer Kalani Hodges was just 16 years old when he was charged as a minor for the murder of Adrian Martinez, who was shot dead in Albuquerque, New Mexico, after being lured to a robbery under the guise of a drug deal. Hodges was also accused in the separate shooting of another victim who was left permanently paralyzed, but only served 2.5 years in custody due to his age at the time of his crimes. He was released from juvenile detention in 2022, only to be accused months later of killing 71-year-old Nieneker Johnson in a hit-and-run while driving drunk. According to police, Hodges was driving 95 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone when he struck the victim's vehicle. He fled the scene on foot, leaving Johnson to die just blocks from her home, but was identified as the driver by a witness who was riding in Hodges' car as a passenger when the accident occurred. Authorities issued a warrant for vehicular homicide and reckless driving, but Hodges remained on the run for 2 years before finally being arrested in December of 2024. Later that month, the judge ruled that he'll remain in custody at the Bernalillo County Jail, pending the outcome of his case. Number 10. Andrew Kachu. 25-year-old Andrew Kachu was 17 years old when he was convicted of the robbery and murder of Luis Amela. In October of 2016, he was prosecuted as an adult and sentenced to 50 years to life in the California state prison system, but he served just 6 years before he was released in November of 2021 after his case was sent back to juvenile court due to his age at the time of his crimes. Just months later, in July of 2022, Andrew, who now goes by the name Andres Benjamin Kachu, was charged in connection with a series of new crimes, including a pursuit with Los Angeles County deputies while allegedly driving under the influence of drugs. Following his arrest, an attorney representing the family of his murder victim blamed prosecutor George Gascon's so-called woke policies for the recall effort, resulting in his early release from prison. Kachu pleaded not guilty to felony charges of fleeing or pursuing peace officers' motor vehicle, possession of a firearm by a felon, possession for sale of methamphetamine, and possession for sale of cocaine, along with several misdemeanors. Records show that he's serving prison time and will become eligible for parole in May of 2026. Number 9. Albert Flick. After being served with divorce papers and kicked out of his Westbrook, Maine home in 1979, Albert Flick went to collect his belongings and stabbed his wife, Sandra, to death. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison but was released after just 9 years due to good behavior. But his pattern of violence against women continued, and in 2007, he allegedly punched a woman and stabbed her with a fork. 3 years later, Flick was convicted of assaulting another woman. Prosecutors recommended an 8 to 9 year prison sentence, but the judge believed that the aging defendant was getting too old to commit any more violent acts and sentenced him to 4 years. Shortly after his release in 2014, Flick crossed paths with a woman he had assaulted in 2010 and threatened her, landing him back behind bars for another 2 years. Following his release in 2016, he befriended 48-year-old Kimberly Doby at a library in Lewiston. Flick could tell that Doby was struggling and offered to feed her children, but the elderly felon became obsessed with the woman and began following her relentlessly around town. In 2018, he stabbed Doby to death outside a laundromat in broad daylight while her children looked on, resulting in another murder conviction and a life sentence for the now 83-year-old repeat offender. Number 8. Paul Tainui. Paul Panaumu Tainui was going by the name Paul Russell Wilson when he murdered his ex-girlfriend, 21-year-old Kimberly Schroeder, in 1994. He was on lifelong parole 24 years later when he assaulted and killed his co-worker, 27-year-old Nicole Marie Tuxford, at her Christchurch, New Zealand home in April of 2018. In 2019, Tainui was sentenced to life with a minimum of 28 years for Tuxford's murder. During an inquest that was held to examine the systemic failures that led to him killing again, his employer admitted that they didn't tell his co-workers about his prior conviction so they could get to know him first. But Tainui's employer could not be held liable for Tuxford's death due to legal protections that were in place, and corrections officials had failed to tell them that the parolee was dangerous due to his tendency to target young females. The corrections agency also passed the blame, claiming that they hadn't been properly notified that Tainui was a criminal psychopath. Consequently, they lacked the necessary information for performing an accurate risk assessment management. Additionally, just hours before Tuxford's murder, Tainui had been stopped for drunk driving, leading many to question whether more effective police intervention could have prevented Tuxford's death. Number 7. Jess Rush. In 1991, a Missouri teenager named Jess Rush brutally assaulted and murdered convenience store clerk Trudy Darby in the state's Ozarks region. He was sentenced to life behind bars but was released in 2022 after winning a resentencing hearing due to his young age at the time of the crime. Rush had also previously been a suspect in the murders of at least 2 other women, but was never charged in connection with those cases. Barely a year after his release from prison, he was arrested during a traffic stop in Polk County after sheriff's deputies received a tip that he had a 9mm pistol. While searching his car and home, law enforcement found a handgun and a rifle. Rush was charged with being a felon in possession of multiple firearms and violating the terms of his parole. Within hours of being booked into custody, he was transported to prison to resume serving his original life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 6. Bryan Davis. In 2003, 43-year-old Bryan Davis killed his roommate, Edgar Westfall III, with a hatchet at their Bisbee, Arizona home. He then tried to burn the victim's body and was subsequently charged with second-degree murder, arson, and tampering with evidence. After reaching an agreement with Cochise County prosecutors, he pleaded no contest to the murder charge and guilty to the arson and evidence tampering charges. Davis was sentenced to a maximum of 16 years for murder, along with a 10-year consecutive term for the lesser counts, resulting in his release from prison in 2019. 3 years later, in June of 2022, he stabbed his neighbors, a couple in their 40s, during an argument. One of the victims died from their injuries, and in 2024, Davis was found guilty of manslaughter and assault. He was sentenced to 28 years for the manslaughter charge and 15 years for the assault charge, effectively amounting to a life term. Following Davis's sentencing hearing, 12 News spoke with Amy Keith, the daughter of his first victim. She said that she believed the second victim's death could have been prevented if Davis's original sentences of 16 and 10 years had run consecutively rather than concurrently, which meant that he would have still been in prison when the knife attack on his neighbors occurred. Number 5. Jamie Harris. 47-year-old John Songer was in the wrong place at the wrong time when he was fatally struck by a stray bullet outside a Charlotte, North Carolina bar in December of 2018. He didn't know his accused killer, 35-year-old Jamie Harris, who fired the deadly gunshot from a car before fleeing the scene. Harris had previously served a 10-year prison sentence for a murder that took place in 2005. He was released in 2017, but was arrested several times starting months later after he completed his parole. In September of 2018, he was accused of robbing and assaulting an 80-year-old woman who suffered a bone fracture after being shoved onto the pavement as she left physical therapy. Harris bonded out of jail just hours after his arrest, leaving him free to shoot John Songer 3 months later. Following the suspect's arrest, Songer's friends said that the victim had been failed by the system. Their sentiments were echoed by his elderly assault victim, who said she couldn't believe that Harris didn't even get a slap on the hand. Records showed that he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to a maximum of 12 years in prison, with a projected release date of April 2029. Number 4. Edward Kind. The small city of Salamanca, New York was shaken to its core following the brutal assault and murder of 39-year-old nurse and mother of 2, Penny Brown, who was strangled to death with her dog's leash while jogging on a nature trail in 1999. Her teenage killer, Edward Kind, was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison due to his status of a minor at the time of the crime. He served 24 years behind bars before being paroled in early 2023 at the age of 39, much to the outrage of Brown's family and victims' rights advocates. Just months later, Kind was accused of violating his parole. He spent several weeks in jail before being released into transitional housing. In July of 2024, less than 16 months after his release, Kind went on the run. He remained at large for 6 days before the Division of Parole notified the Cattaraugus County Sheriff's Department that he had failed to show up for a scheduled meeting with his parole officer. Deputies picked him up at a residence in Salamanca where he had been banished by the Seneca Nation of Indians due to his criminal history. Kind was spared from prison time and instead released on GPS monitoring, with critics blaming Governor Kathy Hochul's so-called pro-criminal policies for the repeated decision to free him from custody. Number 3. Seantrell Murdock. In what was later described as a cold-blooded and brazen random attack, 66-year-old artist Carrie Kwok was shot to death on a September evening in 2024 while painting a mural in St. Paul, Minnesota. Her killer, 29-year-old Seantrell Tyrese Murdock, was fatally shot hours later during a confrontation with law enforcement outside a home in Belle Plaine. According to police, Murdock should have been incapable of accessing a gun due to warning signs concerning his mental health and substance abuse. In January of 2023, his mother took him to an emergency room where he assaulted staff members and was placed in restraints. During the visit, Murdock reportedly said he was afraid of himself and wanted to kill people. A court rejected a petition to commit Murdock, instead ordering him to abide by strict rules, including taking his medication and attending counseling. He met those requirements, and the case was dismissed 6 months later. Murdock also had a criminal record, including a prior conviction for felony burglary, which should have precluded him from owning a gun. Moreover, the tragic shooting occurred just months after Minnesota lawmakers enacted the state's red flag gun law, which enables relatives, courts, and police to petition for a person to be banned from buying or possessing firearms during a time of crisis. Number 2. David Jonathan Brown. In 2015, a therapist contacted University of Southern California psychology professor Bosco Tajan from a hospital in Pasadena, California, and warned him that one of his doctoral students, 28-year-old David Jonathan Brown, had threatened to kill him. A threat assessment team harbored serious concerns about Brown, and Tajan took a leave of absence before returning to work in the spring of 2016. In December of that year, Brown stabbed 50-year-old Tajan to death outside his 10th floor lab, where the victim's colleagues could overhear the killer yelling, "You have been torturing me for years. I have finally had enough." Brown was arrested minutes later and later charged with first-degree murder, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity in January of 2018. He was committed to a state psychiatric hospital where he could remain for the rest of his life. In a statement defending its decision to allow Brown back on campus after threatening Tajan's life, a university official claimed that numerous measures had been taken to ensure the professor's safety. Furthermore, Tajan had supported the decision to welcome Brown's return despite the warning signs of potential future violence, including increasingly erratic behavior and an incident involving the destruction of property in Tajan's lab. Number 1. Mordecia Black. During the early morning hours of June 4th, 2025, an intruder broke into the Cincinnati home of gym owner Patrick Herringer and stabbed him to death before fleeing the scene. The accused killer, 38-year-old Mordecia Black, had been paroled just months earlier after serving 8 years of a decade-long prison sentence for beating a man unconscious during a robbery. In February of 2025, just a month after his release, Black violated parole by cutting off his GPS ankle monitor, resulting in a warning from law enforcement that he was considered dangerous and not to approach him. 3 months later, in May of this year, Black became wanted for felony burglary after he reportedly entered the home of 2 women and left without further incident. In a scathing Facebook post just days after her husband's murder, Herringer's wife Sarah blamed state and local authorities for Patrick's death. She accused both entities of negligence and condemned the Cincinnati Police Department for possibly only having one officer on patrol at the time of the killing, stating that Patrick might still be alive if civilian safety had been a priority. Sarah has vowed to take legal action if necessary, saying that she won't stop until every failure is brought to light. Thanks for watching. Would you rather solve a case that clears an innocent person's name or solve one that finally convicts a guilty person who got away, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.